The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is truth. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents Nationalization and Diversity versus Naturalization and Warship. But before he begins, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Now, let's receive our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam, Shalom, Assalamu Alaikum, Walaikum. We want to share some information with you tonight. Much of this information has been redundantly presented to you due to the fact that the nations are beginning to restrict their trade with the United States Corporation Company. Logically, it is injuring and interfering with the lives of all the people of the land, including the Aboriginal people that have nothing to do with the political corruption that has been practiced for decades on our land, and some of these things being done in our name, etc. And we're speaking just to clear the air on the issue of assumed jurisdictional authorities, assumed jurisdictional civil powers exercised on our land, and the assumed misidentities and misclassifications of the natural people of the land for the purpose of non-de-guerre activities with the bottomry instruments that have been used by members of the Roman Curia operating at North America, as well as by members of the British Accredited Registry operating at North America and administered from Fleet Street, England, etc., on cause of the Unum Sanctum and Dum Diversus, the Sister QV operations of the Popes of Rome, generally referred to in their legal platforms as the Doctrine of Discovery, which includes other church bulls, etc. So we're going to hit on a few issues that are important to the people at large, because as people are beginning to become more cognate of the issue of their divine right of being distinguished from any political labels, etc., or assumed jurisdiction in relationship to those different labels, brands, and tags, and nom de guerre, to share such information with you that may aid and assist many of the people that may be confused about the issue of nationality and nationalization, which relates to the issue of diversity, versus naturalization and warship operations, etc. Because many people are limited in their information to make the distinction between the two, as those two are and have been operative on the land and among the people for centuries, but people who have not been taught fundamental civics are less adept in the areas of citizenship classifications, as well as being less adept in the issue of nationalization versus naturalization. And as you know, it's not a secret that it has been a common practice at North America and pretty much exported around the world through other communications, the code systems that have been accepted incorrectly by many of the Aboriginal people who have been accepting the code classifications of skin color, persons of color as an example, Negro, black people example, white people as an example, and not knowing that these different social engineering and also political status names and appellations have their functional purpose for both status and heritability or the lack thereof, etc. And knowing that many of the people are less aware of certain principles of what is called citizenship, we're sharing some things with you tonight to help clear up some concepts and some misconceptions also. So as a starter, we want to mention to you the benefits of consciousness that is riding the waves of conversation with the world, not just here at North America, but actually all around the world, which have been accelerated by the active Moors at North America, and that has given rise to many peoples from even other nation states around the world as a subject matter to bring remedy and some remedy to their restoration of their estates, etc. Because it has brought attention to details that many people have, unfortunately, and for lack of information, ignored. And it has become cognate that most of the governments of the operating on the planet have become corrupted and are heavily influenced by the private owners of the United States Corporation Company, who have been guising themselves in other nations too, using the same projection principle of taking on the identities of the people of the different nation states and actually fostering their Luciferian operations and corruption, etc. And so many of the problems that have been affecting the Moors at North America has been affecting peoples of other nation states too. And we have had communications over the years with people from other nation states, etc., who have adopted many of the informational or writ concepts that we have been producing in order for people to become more cognate of the restoration of their lost estates, etc. And so the issues that was set forth before the world by our illustrious prophet Noble Ali during 1910, 1911, 1912, and officially 1913 with the establishment of the old Canaanite temple for the restoration of the lost estate of the Moors, etc., of the North Gate. Many people over the years have been influenced by the operations of the Moorish Divine and National Movement set forth by Noble Ali with the help of others, which you will find as you do research, that has taken the world actually by now, in these days, by storm. And you'll see it, the principles expressed in many ways. But I want to make some things clear to you and to help many people who may be confused, because keep this in mind, as people become more conscious of what has happened here, particularly at North America, and has been exported, that has contaminated many other governments on the planet, I'll present to you one of the most interesting and fact-based and points of reference that you can do cross-references relative to the old Canaanite temple set forth by Noble Drew Ali, which became the most divine and national movement of the world, etc. Notice that of the world. I'll read a divine warning by the prophet for the nations. And this is a document that can be referenced and has been referenced by people here at North America and people around the world from different nation states, etc., that has brought to the forefront a cognizance of many human rights violations and many international law violations and many treaty violations and many constitutional violations, etc. So share with me this moment, and I'll read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations. This is available in the Moorish literature issued by the Moorish Temple of Science, etc. And most of these editorials have been gathered from the newspapers of Noble Drew Ali during the time of his operations on the land at North America, and compiled as footnotes for the people to study, to research, cross-reference. Editorial: a divine warning by the prophet for the nations. The citizens of all free national governments, according to their national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the free national names of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables and are subject to all inferior names and abuses and mistreatments that the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the names and the principles that delude to slavery. I, the prophet, was prepared by the great God Allah to warn my people to repent from their sinful ways and go back to that state of mind of their forefathers' divine and national principles, that they will be law abiders and receive their divine right as citizens according to the free national constitution that was prepared for all free national beings. They are to claim their own free national name and religion. There is but one issue for them to be recognized by the government and of the earth, and it comes only through the connection of the Moorish divine national movement, which is incorporated in this government and recognized by all other nations of the world. And through it, they and their children can receive their divine rights unmolested by other citizens, that they can cast a free national ballot at the polls under the free national constitution of the state's government, and not under a granted privilege as has been the existing condition for many generations. And you who doubt whether I, the prophet, and my principles are right for the redemption of my people, go to those who know law in the city hall and among the officials in your government, and ask them under an intelligent tone, and they will be glad to render you a favorable reply, for they are glad to see me bring you out of darkness into light. Money doesn't make the man. It is free national standards and power that make a man and a nation. The wealth of all national governments, gold and silver and commerce, belong to the citizens alone, and without their national citizenship, by name and principles, you have no true wealth. And I am hereby calling on all true citizens that stand for a national free government and the enforcement of the Constitution to help me in my great missionary work, because I need all support of all true American citizens of the United States of America. Help me to save my people who have fallen from the constitutional laws of government. Now, I'm depending on your support to get them back to the constitutional fold again, that they may learn, or that they will learn to love instead of hate, and will live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, supporting our free national constitution for the United States of America. And I love my people, and I desire their unity and mind back to their own national and divine standards, because day by day, they have been violating the national and constitutional laws of their government by claiming names and principles that are unconstitutional. If Italians, Greeks, English, Chinese, Japanese, Turks, and Arabians are forced to proclaim their free national names and religion before the constitutional government of the United States of America, it is no more than right that the law should be enforced upon all American citizens alike. In all other governments, when a man is born and raised there and asks for his national descent name, and if he fails to give it, he is misused, imprisoned, or exiled. Any group of people that fail to answer up to the constitutional standards of law by name and principles, because to be a citizen of any government, you must claim your national descent name, because they place their trust upon issues and names formed by their forefathers. The word Negro deludes to the Latin language to the word nigger, and the same as the word colored deludes to anything that is painted, varnished, and dyed. And every nation must bear a national descent name of their forefathers. Before honoring thy fathers and thy mothers, because honoring thy fathers and thy mothers, your days will be lengthened upon the earth. And these names have never been recognized by any true American citizen of this day, and through your free national names, you are known and recognized by all nations of the earth, and are recognized by said national government in which they live. The 14th and 15th Amendments brought the North and the South in unit, placing the Southerners, who were at that time without power, with the constitutional body of power. And at that time, 1865, the free national constitutional law that was in force since 1774 declared all men equal and free. And if all men are declared by the free national constitution to be free and equal, since the constitution has never been changed, there is no need for the application of the 14th and 15th Amendments for the salvation of our people and citizens. And so there isn't but one supreme issue for my people to use to redeem that which was lost. And that is through the above statements. Then the lion and the lamb can lie down together in yonder hills, and neither will be harmed, because love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice will be reigning in the land. In these days, the United States will be one of the greatest civilized and prosperous governments of the world. But if the above principles are not carried out by the citizens and my people in this government, the worst is yet to come, because the great God of the universe is not pleased with the works that are being performed in North America by my people, and this great sin must be removed from the land to save it from enormous earthquakes, diseases, etc. And I, the prophet, do hereby believe that the administration of the government being more wisely prepared by more genius citizens that believe in their free national constitution and laws, and through the help of such classes of citizens, I, the prophet, truly believe that my people will find the true and divine way of their forefathers and learn to stop serving carnal customs and merely ideas of man that have never done them any good, but have always harmed them. So I, the prophet, am hereby calling aloud with a divine plea to all true American citizens to help me to remove this great sin which has been committed and is being practiced by my people in the United States of America, because they know it is not the true and divine way. And without understanding, they have fallen from the true light into utter darkness of sin. And there is not a nation on earth today that will recognize them socially, religiously, politically, or economically, etc. in their present condition of their endeavorment, in which they themselves try to force upon a civilized world, and they will not refrain from their sinful ways and actions, and their deeds have brought Jim Crowism, segregation, and everything that brings harm to human beings on earth. And they fought the Southerners for all those great misuses. But I have traveled in the South, and I've examined conditions there, and it is the works of my people continuously practicing the things which bring dishonor, disgrace, and disrespect to any nation that lives the life. And I'm hereby calling on all true American citizens for moral support and finance to help me in my great missionary work to bring my people out of darkness into marvelous light. Signed, Noble Drew Ali. Conceptually, for those of you who have heard of the Moorish Divine and National Movement and the establishment of the old Canaanite Temple in 1913, and know of the counter meeting that had been taking place during that same period on Jekyll Island by Woodrow Wilson and bankers and Khazarian mafia operatives for the bankers through the Roman Curia members off the coast of Georgia, and with the bankruptcy of the United States corporation, which had been established fraudulently after they assassinated Lincoln, etc., was reiterated or reactivated in 1913, and that political platform lasted until around 1925 when it went bankrupt again. And keep in mind, you must make the distinction between the constitutional government, the constitutional offices, the constitutional officers, and the constitutional vested seats of delegated authority, constitutionally distinguished from the corporate operations of the corporate United States, foreign dignitaries, etc., who have been falsely presenting to the world that they are the country, particularly since 1871 with the Organic Act of Congress of 1781, which are two different platforms. And one of the things that Noble Drew Ali emphasized to the people was that distinction. And as a matter of fact, the old Canaanite Temple was registered in 1925 as the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, as a civic organization. And of course, civics is the science that deals with citizenship, classifications of citizenship, the relations of government and, i.e., the people of the land. And of course, the classifications of citizenship come from what you call just sanguinists, which would be the nationals, which is the first or the highest level in the classification of citizenship. However, it is by divine birth of the just sanguinists, and that would be an AA classification. And those of you who have been dealing with national and international law issues and controversies of diversity are well aware of the classifications that at this time list from A1 to A19, etc. Now, at North America, they have roughly 5 different classifications with subcategories under all of those classifications, which we'll give you note later on. But we want to give you some supports so that you can have a clearer comprehension on both the supporters of constitutional enforcement and those who are adverse to constitutional enforcement. Those who are supportive of constitutional enforcement logically teach law and civics and history together, because you know that goes together. And logically, people who don't know law will not consciously or cooperatively enforce treaty and constitution because they're not aware of it. So it becomes very necessary for people to do some deeper research to have a comprehension of how can we, the people of the land, begin to bring unity and remedy to the theft of our birthrights and our vast estate. And for those of you who are less cognate of these issues, please look up the word trust, estate, status, wardship, nationalization, naturalization, etc., and get a cleaner and clearer concept for yourselves, because it is an established fact that at North America, and particularly in any of the school systems set up by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, that such foundation information is excluded from the curriculum. So you will not have grounded law and civics being taught in the educational systems, particularly that in North America, nor will you have constructional or instructional constitutional law being taught, which logically would include treaties. When most people hear the phrase or the statement that people make enforcing the Constitution for the United States, or when they hear Noble Drew Ali mentioning the enforcement of the Constitution being primal to the Moorish Divine and National movement, you will be better armed with yourself intellectually and politically and socially to defend the Moorish Divine and National movement, which is the defense of the people, actually. So a lot of people who take the position of countering or attempting or intentionally countering the enforcement of the Constitution would expose themselves as being enemies to the cause of uplifting their own people, etc. And I read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, because many people have been deceived into thinking that Drew Ali did not teach law and civics. And so you would know that also when you do research into his papers, etc. Now I want to read Article 6 of the Constitution for the United States to give you a concept to measure what Drew Ali has presented to all the Moors of North America. And keep in mind, when he addressed the Moors of North America, he also addressed the nations. And I think a lot of times when people look at the Moorish Divine and National movement, their concepts may be skewed by the assumption that the address to the people was only to Moors at the old Canaanite temple. That address was to the nations of the earth, to the world. Now, in relationship to the Constitution and the obligations of persons who are constitutional officers, distinguished from those who are corporate officers who have been countering this activity, etc., I will read the obligations in relationship to all persons or peoples claiming governmental seats or authority at North America, i.e. Constitution for the United States, Article 6. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges of every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. All persons that hold any office or claims any political authority or exercises any legislative powers, whether from the executive venue, legislative venue, congressional venue, are all bound by oath to uphold the Constitution for the United States, etc. That law principally is referred to as the common law. So when you hear people use the phrase the common law, they're talking about the principles of constitutional law. Now, common law is distinguished from the Roman law, and distinguished from the modern civil law, and distinguished from the canon law, and from other systems of law. The common law is that body of law and justice theory which was originated, developed, and formulated, and is administered in England, and since the Renaissance, initiated in Spain and Italy, and its influence upon Europe during the 14th to the 16th century. Common law is distinguished from law created by enactments or legislation. The common law comprises the body of those principles and rules of action related to the government and to the security of persons and property, which derive their authority solely from the usages and customs of immemorial antiquity, or from the judgments and decrees of the courts recognizing, affirming, and enforcing such usages and customs, and in this sense, particularly the ancient unwritten law of England. Common law is distinguished from equity law, as it is a body of rules and principles, written or unwritten, which are fixed and immutable authority, and which must be applied to controversies rigorously and in their entirety, and cannot be modified to suit the peculiarities of a specific case or colored by any judicial discretion, and which rests confessedly upon the custom or statute as distinguished from any claim to ethical superiority. Now, when Drew Ali said, go back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers, you will find that the customs and traditions that the common law is derived from, that was introduced in the northern territories of Northwest Africa, on the east side, East Africa, etc., on the Iberian Peninsula, which would include England, etc., then you would deal with those Moors who, through the Renaissance, that is mentioned in the common law, the jurisprudence principles which was adopted in England and transferred to the jurisdictional platforms around the world, but basically dealing with what is known as positive law, jurisprudence, etc. And so when people deal with jurisprudence, there are assumptions when they mention that those principles have been promoted from England. They're thinking usually the hybrid Europeans, and they're not thinking the Moors and the Mores and the Doves and the Picts, who are the founders, i.e., of the jurisprudence principles that are used around the world, i.e., commonly referred to as Muslim law or fatwa. These principles come from Muslim law, which many of you know a couple of years ago, Obama mentioned that when he talked about the Treaty of Tripoli at Cairo, in Egypt, or Hikupta. And those who know the foundations, etc., of jurisprudence will not dispute that the fundamental principles of fatwa or constitutional principles are ancient, coming from the ancient traditions and customs. And this is why it is important for the Moors to go back to the state of mind of their ancient mothers and fathers, because one of the things that you're going to recognize almost immediately is that our concepts of law have been totally corrupted. Our concepts of government have been corrupted. Our concepts of who is who has been corrupted. Our concepts of what the United States is and is not have been corrupted. Our concepts of constitutional enforcement has been misused, suppressed, and deliberately, not accidentally, in order for persons who have less than honorable intentions to present themselves as legitimate government when actually they're the organized cabal or Khazarian platform of operators who actually own the United States Corporation Company, which has been falsely promoted as the country after the overthrow of the Republic order during the Lincoln administration. And of course, when you go back to the state of mind of your mothers and fathers and do some research, you'll find this out. And you'll recognize why much abuses have been put upon the people today, including and not limited to the Aboriginal peoples of the land. And as many of you note, many hybrid Europeans are making videos around the world now making reference to that hidden history that has been executed at North America, because the middle class of the hybrid Europeans that have made a comfortable life for them for many generations have been dissolved by the criminal operatives of the Roman Curia, who have been running the United States Corporation Company falsely for the last 150 years or more, and have been subsequently draining the resources under their unum sanctum operations. And now it has destroyed the middle class hybrid Europeans, and now they're crying out and referring to themselves as U.S. sovereign citizens, which is an oxymoron, because you can't be citizen and sovereign. The sovereignty of the people is vested in the nation itself and recognized by the nations of the world. And whenever there's a diversity of a national argument in controversy relative to lands, estates, etc., it would be before the legitimate or valid courts of the United States under the Constitution and treaties via a consular venue or a court of general sessions. And whenever you're dealing with nationals or the nationals of the land, distinguished from the corporate United States citizens, automatically diversity would come into play. And for those of you who may need a little help in that area, we'll go into the law book and bring up diversity so your concepts will be more correct. Now keep in mind, by the people of the land being denationalized by the colonial operatives operating under United States Corporation Company, and also having been deceived by them, making them think that the Paleolith or hybrid Europeans who have colonized our land are the Americans, which is a fraud, a historical, factual, and political fraud. We will come into the issue of diversity. And so keep in mind, for those, take note as we're going along, look up diversity. And I want you, when you're reading diversity, read the judicial platform or the judicial issue presented to you via Article 3, Section 1 and Section 2. So keep in mind, it is well known by people around the world, whenever there's an issue of controversy dealing with different peoples operating on the lands in different nation states, etc., whenever there's a controversy, the lawful platform for that controversy to be held is in a court of diversity or a court of special sessions. Now, keep in mind, when Drew Ali began nationalizing the people of the land back into the constitutional fold of government, they were given nationality cards. And the nationality card automatically establishes in the issue of assumed jurisdiction that assumed jurisdiction under the Christian black codes shall not take place, as their status had been corrected, and the issue of diversity automatically comes to the fore. Now, those of you who are familiar with the old Canaanite temple and the civic platform that Drew Ali set up with the Moorish Temple of Science, you'll recognize in Act 1 that the Grand Sheiks and Assistant Grand Sheiks, governors and chairmen, etc., all of those people put in position of power were put in power to make law and to enforce law, and it was to be known before all the members of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science if they live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And of course, that's those principles. And therefore, it is their duty and their jobs to hit the hedges and the highways and logically to teach constitutional enforcement, which is absolutely, unequivocally, and undeniably civics. So let's look at diversity. Diversity, etc., as a principle of citizenship. The diversity of citizenship is a phrase used with reference to the jurisdiction of the federal courts, which under the United States Constitution, Article 3 and Section 2, extends to cases between citizens of different states, designating the condition existing when the party on the one side of a lawsuit is a citizen of one state and the party on the other side is a citizen of another state. When this is the basis of jurisdiction, all persons on one side of the controversy must be citizens of different states from all the persons of the other side. Now, and then you'll have reference. And diversity as a principle in criminal pleading. A plea by the prisoner in bar of execution alleging that he is not the same who was attainted, upon which a jury is immediately impaneled to try the collateral issue thus raised, viz. The identity of the person and not whether he is guilty or innocent, i.e., for that has been already decided. Therefore, when anyone with a nationality card, a jury must immediately be impaled, and logically, Article 3, Section 2 must be enforced. That's the law, and that is the diversity issue, etc. So if you have a nationality card and there's an issue with another state, etc., that principle of the Constitution for the United States is international in its nature. And therefore, it is the obligation of all sheiks and grand sheiks, whenever there's an issue between the corporate state and any members or nationals of the land, i.e., in any relationship with the Moorish Divine and National Movement or any subdivisional activities, which would include the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, Moorish Science Temple of America, Order of the Great Seal, or any other Moorish active group, etc., or peoples, their venue for remedy would be a consular venue, i.e., under the international law principle established via the Constitution for the United States for activities operating on the land, which would include the enforcement of treaties. Thus, the issue of diversity supersedes any assumed jurisdiction by the corporate state operatives, etc., or any persons claiming any authority whatsoever, and any laws of any state to the contrary has no standing whatsoever. And this is known by all adepts, all persons who claim to be senators, congressmen, governors, lawyers, or magistrates or judges, etc., are obligated, and anything that they say to the contrary has no standing whatsoever. And all of them are bound by oath to support and to enforce that Constitution, which comprises the treaties and the Constitution for the United States. And all of them are binding against the United States, etc. And that is their obligation. Hold them to their obligation, because they've been abusing our people under the guise of authority that was never vested with them. And this is why over the years we've always taught the people the fundamental principles of armament of jurisdiction whenever there's an issue. And so whenever there was any controversy, etc., between a Moor and a U.S. citizen, etc., corporate person, etc., the Grand Sheiks and the governors of the Moorish movement have obligation to intervene under the consular venue of Article 3, Section 2, because their duty to enforce the law. And Drawley said that if you don't believe that his program is correct for the redemption of our people and citizens, go to those who know law. Now, for those of you who would like more detail, read Article 3, Section 1 and Section 2 of the Constitution for the United States, and it will give you clarity in that area, because it will show you the established courts, etc. Now, in relationship to naturalization, naturalization would be like a jus soli position, and this is where under legislation of the 14th Amendment, which you already recognize in the divine warning by the prophet for the nation, he told you that those things do not apply to us, etc. However, they've been used by corporate United States operatives to give what you call corporate citizenship to people who will relinquish their citizenship in their native states to be participate with the U.S. corporation. Keep in mind, they're not the people of the land. That's legislation, i.e. 14th Amendment. Now, when you do research into the 14th and 15th Amendment, you will find that they were never constitutionally ratified and therefore are referred to in law as quote-unquote negative law, which means it has been a colorable practice, but is indeed not the law. And through that venue, they've actually brought people under their stock options of their sister QB trust operations under the doctrine of discovery deceptively, and made people thought that they were citizens of the land when in fact they were actually stock for the corporations. And this is much of the fraud that has been going on for quite some time. And for those who have been really supportive of Noble Drawley's program for redeeming the people of the land, etc., have been very firm in enforcing the Constitution for the United States and the treaties which comprises the supreme law of the land. And those who have been enemies of Noble Drawley have been exactly the opposite. And so when you see people under the guise of supporting Noble Drawley's program for redemption of the people and the lost estate, countering the enforcement of treaty and constitution, they are revealing to you who they really are. And knowing that when Noble Drawley, as an example, in 1928, he had left his office on a trip, etc., because he was dealing with other nation states, etc., on behalf or presenting to the world, representing the Moorish Divine and National Movement with other international figures, etc. And many of you know the history, some of the history where he went to Havana, Cuba, etc. And then you'll see a lot of the paperwork that has been hidden from a lot of the Moors in relationship to that trip, and the oppositions that was taking place with the Secretary of State for the United States Corporation Company, etc., who on the sidelines, they were trying to undermine his right of claim to the land, etc. So that's another point of reference that you all, those who are sincere for uplifting our people, can do some research on yourselves. And then you can look into the FBI papers and recognize the the operations of the infiltration that took place during 27, 28, etc., and the motivation of Noble Drew Ali in 1928 to adopt a religious affidavit to start protecting the estates of the Moors, and he also set up a trust also to protect the estates of the Moors. And the enemies to the Prophet were adamantly against teaching the people civics, adamantly against teaching the people the issues of trust of both government seats and the trust that Drew Ali set up, because many of them had been compromised and they had been using the Moorish platform actually for their own private and personal gain. And for those of you who are aware of much of the literature that Drew Ali presented to the people, you will see that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali did what is known as the additional bylaws for the Moorish Americans, and you'll see that in the back of the questionnaire, known also to 101 questions for Moorish children, etc., where he was countering those who had infiltrated the temples, etc. And for those of you who have files on Noble Drew Ali in relationship to the FBI infiltrating the Moorish Divine National Movement, and so also COINTELPRO operations, which you'll find with the Hoover's papers, etc., you'll find that the persons who have been against Noble Drew Ali teaching civics will deliberately have hidden these papers from the people, particularly in the temples, etc. And because many of them who have been informed after the assassination of Noble Drew Ali, which took place exactly 1 year to the day after that meeting of him adopting the religious certification as the corporate operations for the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which was unincorporated, etc. To the day 1 year later they assassinated him. And you will notice that they will ardently suppress the history of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and the civic operations, and they will suppress the information of the infiltration, etc., which is why you don't see them issuing those papers to the people so that the people can defend the Moorish Divine and National Movement, which is actually in support of their birthright. And you'll also find, when you do the research into the FBI papers, that many of the administrators of what became the Moorish Science Temple of America, etc., the corporate operations for the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, they colluded and destroyed the press that Noble Drew Ali had set up for the Moors, etc., and had also thrown his furniture out on the street, and also cooperated with many of the agents of the FBI, and many of the people who have been administrators of the Moorish Science Temple of America were actually, they refer to them as informants for the FBI, and they've been operating since that time, since the 20s, etc. And so when you look at those who are really supporting uplifting fallen humanity, you will find those among the people who are teaching treaty enforcement and constitutional enforcement. And those who are in opposition were followers of those who, via COINTELPRO operations, mainly most of that being headed by J. Edgar Hoover, which you can do research into that area and you'll find that history too. And for many of you others, you'll find, do some research into congressional records on the history of American religions, and you will see some of the organizations that split off from the Moorish Divine and National Movement, etc., and have been hiding a lot of this information. So when many of you see controversies that are out there with people who are trying to, as you might say, cause what you call schism operations, you will recognize their motives when you do the research into those documents, which are in both congressional records and in FBI papers. However, though many of those papers, which you will find, will be redacted, it's enough information for you that you can see what has been told to you as the quote-unquote the great sellout that you don't see a lot of the people discussing publicly. And of course, many of the people have been upset with me because I published a lot of that stuff in 201 in relationship to the Moroccan Star newspaper, which we had established. And much of the opposition has come from COINTELPRO operatives, even to this day, who are actually FBI informants, etc. But you don't need to take personality. You need to do a little bit of research, and these people will speak for themselves. However, it is for the benefit of the people. Now, naturalization is the legal just soleil process that is done through legislation and is generally held under the 14th and 15th Amendment, which I mentioned to you earlier is contrary to the operations of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, because it was never constitutional foundation. And of course, they've been creating their bottomry instruments, and which they have used to actually support the bankrupt corporation. And many of you know these operations under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and what is often referred to the people are the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code operations of the straw man, or the don de guerre, and the bonding of birth certificates and marriage certificates, etc., and issued off 55 Water Street to restock, or what you would say refund, the bankrupt United States Corporation Company. And of course, a couple lessons ago, we showed you and shared with you the corporate papers of the United States Corporation Company, etc., which they registered in Florida. And this is because they also had a few of their informants among our own wearing fezzes, making videos claiming that that information was fraudulent, which it is documented, and many of you who are real journalists and researchers knew that information and have shared that information with many people. And so you'll see even a lot of hybrid Europeans now promoting the truth about the political operations here at North America. However, the issue is that the heirs of the land, i.e. Moorish Americans at North America, have been continuously abused by members of the gangs of New York, which is the religious organization that is styled today as the Fraternal Order of Police, etc., and others, etc., who have been misrepresenting the positions of the active Moors, who have been maintaining the integrity of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, distinguished from many who have made little church clubs for themselves and have been taking finance from the people, accounting for none of it, etc., and submitting our people under the 14th Amendment to the United States of America Corporation as U.S. citizens, knowing that their activities were fraudulent, and actually in counter arguments saying that the Moors who have been enforcing the Constitution and Treaty are the fraudulent ones. However, when you do research for yourself, you'll see who's who and what is what. So keep in mind when you have people who are operating under jus soli, or what is called U.S. citizenship, etc., particularly after the 30s, etc., are in fact corporate stock, and in fact are not citizens of any nation state, but they are actually corporate property of the United States Corporation Company, who via those green cards are claiming the people's estates and claiming their labor also by escheat. And any 14th Amendment, i.e. citizen, is under a color of law and is regulated under a color of authority. And active Moors are distinctly and openly rejecting that fraudulent position. And those who have been working as agents for the Roman Curia members are logically in opposition. So when you see people that are in opposition, their very activities will demonstrate who they really are operating for. So do that research for yourselves. Also, I want to share with you, which many of you all already know, a letter from the Secretary of State for the United States, that Secretary Roots, etc., in the relationship or in the matters of citizenship, etc. And this would help many of you because this letter was issued in 1906 to the Secretary of State, and this was like 6 years or so actually, but actually you say actually 4 years in truth, when Drawley began to really seriously work to establish the old Canaanite temple, because much of that work was initiated around early 1910, and then after much of the work was being done and grounded and solidified, then the old Canaanite temple was established officially 1913. But I'll read the letter that was issued to the Secretary of State in 1906. And that letter is Citizenship of the United States and the Issues of Expatriation, page 459, chapter 5, Temporary Provisions, Morocco. Notice Citizenship of the United States, it says Morocco. I want you all to see that right there. There it is. Screenshot it, y'all. Mr. Phillips charged the affairs to Mr. Root, Secretary of State, August the 3rd, 1906. American Legation, Tangier, August the 3rd, 1906. Sir, there are strictly speaking no Moroccan laws relating to citizenship of Moorish subjects in Morocco. The fundamental laws of this non-Christian country are based entirely upon the Islamic code, and no part of which treats of the subject of citizenship. Page 460. Citizenship of the United States, expatriation, etc. There are, however, numerous treaties and conventions between the various Christian countries and the Moorish Empire, by means of which citizenship in this country is defined. But as I understand from the above acknowledged instructions that it is not the desire of the department to call for a report upon such lines, I will therefore confine these remarks to general conditions existing, which may possibly be of some use in connection with the information desired. Number 1, citizenship in Morocco may be said to be governed by the laws pertaining to the same in other countries, with the exception that all persons residing in Morocco who cannot prove foreign citizenship or protection are considered ipso jure as Moorish subjects. 2 and 3. Moorish subjects lost their nationality only by becoming naturalized in or protected by another country having treaty relations with the Moorish Empire. It was established by the Convention of Madrid, concluded July the 3rd, 1880. Now, when Noble Darley mentioned in the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, he said what? The 14th and 15th Amendment is not necessary for the redemption and salvation of my people. Go to those who know law. And what is mentioned in the letter to Secretary Root, that the naturalization is that 14th Amendment platform that was falsely and deceptively introduced, not under Constitution or treaty law, but under a color of law, to deceive our people into accepting or seeking that venue of U.S. citizenship under the 14th Amendment, which was unconstitutional. That's a fact. Do your research, people. Is there any questions, Dr. Nayon?
I'm not sure. There's a lot of comments, but let's see.
Furthermore, I'll present this to you in current affairs, and this is from the Moors' Civil Death, Moors Order Roundtable, Moorish American Heritage Series, etc. And this is from my publications, 1996. And what I wrote in 1996 is what you're experiencing now. The impact of the global economy on the states. The impact of the global economy and the enormous debt that the foreign juristic United States of America Corporation owe the international bankers have forced this foreign juristic corporation into a position wherein it must destroy the middle class in order to maintain its control over the denationalized Moors. The middle class Europeans have played a significant part in history, particularly when it comes to the Revolutionary War, the formation of the Declaration of Independence, and the adoption of the Constitution. It has been the pattern throughout history that revolutions are initiated from the middle class. The revolution of this era has already begun. In an effort to maintain their social and economic position in society, the middle-class Europeans at North America have formed militias and see the Declaration of Independence of 1776 throughout the country. And they have stopped deceiving the public that the Constitution guarantees a democracy and taught the truth of the republic form of government. The middle-class Europeans have produced literature and flooded the internet with civic information. However, they have not preserved the true history as it relates to the heritage, culture, nationality, birthrights, sovereignty, rights, and immunities of the denationalized Moors. And the middle-class Europeans at North America are attempting to free themselves from the abuses of the states and to maintain the enslavement of the labeled Moors. In order for the middle-class Europeans to free themselves from the abuses of the states, they must tell the labeled Moors the truth about their nationality, their birthrights, their sovereign right, and their rights and immunities. And the Europeans who have adopted the political term, quote-unquote, white, as an identity, do not come under the constitutional fold of government, and as a result have no rights, immunities, or protections under the Constitution. In fact, they are not recognized by the international governments and will not receive national and international protection at law. And they must proclaim their nationality: English, French, Irish, Dutch, Holland, German, Scottish, Polish, Italian, etc. in order to come under the constitutional fold and be recognized by the governments of the earth, thereby receiving national and international protections at law. America denotes two continents, essentially one that has been divided only by the Panama Canal. Keep that in mind. North and south, the isthmus, central and adjoining islands. In North America, there are three nations. One is called Canada in your modern terms. One is called Mexico, and the other is the de facto government called the United States of America, claiming unlawful territorial jurisdiction of a portion of North American continent. In South America, there are the nations Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Peru, etc. The Europeans who use American, which refer to two continents, or that one main continent, North and South America, the Isthmus, Central America, and the adjoining islands, they falsely are claiming it as a national name, will be in the similar position as those Europeans who falsely use white as a nationality. And the pedigree of the human family are identified by nationalities and not by continents. The Foreign Juristic United States of America Corporation, with its headquarters in England, has deceived the people into claiming that America is a nation. And the Europeans have used America falsely, claiming it to represent a nation and a nationality to make a de facto territorial jurisdiction or juristic claim upon both continents, North and South America, the Isthmus, Central America, and the adjoining islands. And for those who don't understand, I'll give you some more reference of research. And the adoption of the political term white and the formation of the white political party, 1854. In 1854, the English males, contracted citizens, adopted white, quote unquote, and formed the white political party for themselves and for other European males, Scottish, Irish, Dutch, Holland, German, and French, etc., to continue to distort the fact of nationality and its relationship to sovereignty from the minds of the denationalized Moors, to steal the Moors' birthrights through the caste system words black, Negro, colored, Afro, Indian, West Indian, Hispanic, Spanish, Latino, Puerto Rican, etc. And the English male adopted white, quote unquote, from the Great White Brotherhood, a secret society formed by the Moors. The caste system, coded by labels black and white, implying colors, is used by the colonists to hide the true history, to remove all lawful ties from the Moors who have the land, North, Central, and South America, and to claim the Moors as chattel property, and thereby not being in violation of national and international law. The white political party was formed by Europeans, or for Europeans, who are their members, meaning those adopting the political term white, thereby receiving benefits as a member of this political party. However, the hybrid Europeans who adopted white as an identity surrendered their sovereignty, for sovereignty is rooted in nationality, and all rights lie in sovereignty, and therefore they do not come under the constitutional fold of government, and as a result are not recognized by the international communities. The international governments only recognize beings by their nationalities. Now the European middle class who have adopted the political term white as an identity are in a catch-22. And if they begin to honor their ancestors on a consistent basis and no longer use white as a false substitute for nationality and use their nationalities, English, Irish, German, Scottish, Dutch, Holland, French, Polish, Italian, etc., they will expose the fraud that they were never, quote unquote, white. The importance of nationality and its lawful ties and to the land, as well as the fact that sovereignty is rooted in nationality. And this act will bring nationality and its relationship to sovereignty to the consciousness of the denationalized Moors. And the states are the direct overseers of the chattel property for the anti-democratic Europeans families. That's the aristocratic European families, etc., who actually are the owners of the United States Corporation Company. Chattel slavery never ended at North America. It was merely modified to a highly sophisticated bureaucratic caste system coded by labels black and white, implying colors hidden in the system of voluntary compliance through contracts. Yield the floor.
Okay, so you want to take some questions? There was one question that was asked whether or not you were saying that word should be naturalized or nationalized.
I was making the distinction between nationalized and naturalized. And these things, with the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, have been taught. However, that information had been suppressed among people who have been administrators in different areas of the Moorish movement, who have been neutralized through the Skull and Bones 501c3 agreement and the infiltration that you will find documented when you do research into the FBI papers, etc. Nationalized is the principle by which the sovereign of a nation state reclaims both the estates and the resources of a nation state. Thus, Noble Ali, by act of law, reclaimed the nation state of Morocco at North America, i.e. the North Gate. That's naturalization. That's nationalization. Naturalization is a legislated 14th Amendment political color of law action dealing under the rule of jus soli by the legislature through the 14th and 15th Amendment, i.e. of the United States at that time, which is indeed and is what's called negative law, for it is actually a corporation activity. Has nothing to do with lawful nation operations whatsoever. Therefore, anything done by any praetor, which is the real title of the persons called presidents after Abraham Lincoln, are in fact de facto. That is an established fact.
Someone, Maurice Kennard asked, where are the references of Drew Ali's assassination?
When I went to Chicago, I went to Cook County Library, etc., and I retrieved a lot of what I could at the time. Many of the editorials of the newspapers at that time. And one of the things that I retrieved from the newspapers, a microfilm. For those of you who have the opportunity, particularly those who are journalists and scholars, and those who really want to help the people who have been sincere in the Moorish movement, because you have a lot of infiltrators. And I will share with you one of those issues that I found in the paper. And for those of you who have been addressing or communicating with us here at the House of Reawakening Minds, if you want a copy of the script, because I kept the script exactly as I found it, and I've been sharing it with people for years, and many other good people have been sharing it too, and I'll read it to you as soon as I pull it up. I'm going to try to pull it up. And this is on microfilm from the newspaper at the time. Hold on. Continue, Doc, while I'm searching it out.
Okay, let's try to see if I can questions, comments. Sorry, I do apologize. Just let me, can I just add something, to interject something that is probably a little off. But I was last night looking at Resident Evil. I just turned on, in the television, and it was on it. And Resident Evil, I think it's called Final Chapter or something. And the interesting thing, it came out, I think, in 2016. It was talking about a virus called the T virus. And I heard that you saw a long table of so-called, sort of like they have, was it over in Switzerland or something, they had big meetings and so forth. And they were talking about what they were going to do, and that it was inevitable that that was going to be a lack of food and this and that and the other, and short of a natural disaster, they would have to reduce the population. That everybody was going to die, or they could do it themselves, and they were going to go underground and wait until it was all over and then come back and have the earth refreshed. But I found it interesting that if anybody has seen that movie, they talk about pretty much about like what's going on right now. They just called it T. Have you seen that? Because I know you don't look at a lot of movies. Grand Sheik, are you listening to me? Anybody on the chat seen Resident Evil final chapter? And saw that part where they were talking about destroying the population. I don't know. Let me see if there are any comments. If you haven't seen it, I just recommend that you see it. Okay, Mellowfresh, you saw it. Yeah, I thought, wow, okay, that one missed me. I don't look at a lot of movies. And no, he's not asleep. He's looking for something on his cell phone.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you've seen it, you pretty much see what's going on right now, right? It's just being said in a different way.
Yes.
Mother Delilah said 12 monkeys is another.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but, there's a point where the man just says, he's like, if it doesn't happen naturally, we can make it happen.
Yes.
And we'll go underground, and then those of us who survive, when we come back, like the earth will be cleansed, and it'll have a lot fewer people or occupants. Let me see. I have Dr. G. Oh, thank you. You saw it too. Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to find it.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be on my
well, there's a
phone,
bunch of Resident Evils, but this one is called Final Chapter. I'm pretty sure it is. And Mama, why them bad guys selling packages? I don't know. Who is we, Lady G? Oh wow, this is interesting. Let me see. This is what they hide it in. Order. Okay, I'm going back to see if there's any questions. I am just trying to have a conversation. Well, maybe you have to. Let me see if I can find a question that you can answer.
Yeah.
The power.
As soon as I find it, matter of fact, I think I sent it to you too, Doc. When you post it too. That snippet I took from the paper from the microfilm. With the Noble Drali, 1929.
I don't remember getting. I'm forgetting to change the.
Well, as soon as I find it, I'm gonna send it to you again so you can share it with the people.
Is it something that could be put on a flash drive or something?
Yes, it's very. Yes, matter of fact, it's very small. Yeah. And I'll put a footnote to it too.
Okay. All right. Let me just see if there's any questions. I don't know about that. Not that y'all really care, but while he's looking for that, I don't know who Freethinker is. Could be someone that, but just so you all know, most of you all who have heard, especially on my channel, Office Hours with Dr. G, you all know that I was a pastor, that I've never hidden that. House of Reawakening Minds is not a church. And it's still up there, high up on the banner there, but trust and believe it is not. And, nobody's up here trying to, if it was a church, I'd be preaching to y'all. It's not a church. So if you don't know me, then now you know. I was a pastor. I have not been, 11 years, Grand Sheik? Since we known each other. I have 11 years. So I don't know what that was all about, but okay. Let me see. We need some more actors. Grand Sheik, let's move on.
I'm about to get it on. It's on my other phone.
Yeah, let's move on.
I'll send it to you.
Right.
and then you can post it.
All right.
So it will be posted.
Where am I going to post it?
Yeah.
I have
You
to
put it on flash drive.
Okay.
Then they'll have it.
But people, I wouldn't want them to have to get a whole
But
flash.
anyway.
Do you know? Yeah, I don't know what it is that you're talking about. If I can post it on,
It's
small enough to make a little banner.
It's only a paragraph, and it's from microfilm. When I went to Cook County Library, and they have
this is about Noble Drew Ali.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
question.
and they have a section in there where you can go do research for people who do research, journalists and others. And you can go on the microfilm, and they would the same way you go in the library and you check out as an example, a book. Well, they have a whole section in there where you can go on microfilm and go back to the 1800s in newspapers and stuff like that, and public records. And I was looking up records on Noble Drew Ali at that time, because I had in 2001 I had published the Al Moroccan Star, and I published a proclamation from Noble Drew Ali during that time to be read in every temple. And that proclamation, he was talking about the infiltrators in the temples who was trying to take over the temple and the problems that he was having, etc. And he demanded that letter be read before every meeting. And many of you will share that with you in the future. And many of you will recognize when you go to many temples, you will never see them read that letter. The other thing that I found while looking up times in the area of researching Noble Drew Ali, I also found the area when they modified without constitutional operations the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, and I published that area too, where on the original documentations of Divine Constitution and Bylaws, Drew Ali have part and parcel, which is a law term, and then a notation when they modified it, etc., and didn't notify the people. They have part and partial, which is a legal term. And that created much controversy with people who was a little upset because I paid attention to details and I did that research. I published that also in the paper, which made me unpopular with a lot of quote-unquote administrators, etc. And of course, when I came into the Moorish movement, I came with the intentions of doing good. And the fact of the matter is, by virtue of the fact that, I've always had at the library since I was like 7.5. My father was a reader, and I became had an affinity with books and research because my father always read. He wouldn't even go to the bathroom without a book, and a practice I have even to this day. And so when I came into the movement, I came into the movement not on an emotional whim, but on the fact that I did research. And when I first got some of the literature from Noble Drew Ali, etc., I was actually an assistant minister in the Nation of Islam. And by me always being in the habit of doing research, I also found in the Library of Congress the history of American religions. That's when I found out that the Moorish, that the Temple of Allah was one of the split-offs from the Moorish Temple of Science, etc., and the Temple of Allah became what you know later as the Nation of Islam. And I knew they used to mention Noble Drew Ali when I was assistant minister, but you could never get any detailed information. So logically, with my curiosity, and by me always being interested in research, I did research. And of course, logically, after a while, I ended up coming to the Moorish Science Temple of America. But in doing so, I came into the movement from a scholarly perspective, not from an emotional perspective of following anything, but simply seeking truth. But as soon as I started doing research in Noble Drew Ali's literature, it became obvious to me immediately, even before I officially nationalized in the temple, that there were traitors among the people who was propagating the temples. And so I looked at things from a different point of view. And because I always wrote I was a writer then and a researcher then. I wrote poetry since I was a child. So I didn't have that mentality of just following things without doing research into what I was dealing with. And of course, I used to go travel to Washington, D.C., and do research actually before the internet was popular. And lo and behold, I found them FBI papers. Of course, when I recognized that, I founded the Roundtable in 1982 because I knew that a lot of things that I would be discussing would cause controversy because apparently people who claim to follow Noble Drew Ali or to hold those principles up were not really talking about a lot of these things. And I immediately found, like in private conversations, people would discuss these things. Some of them would, but publicly they would not. And I also had the good gift of meeting Grand Sheik Hamad Il at in Newark, New Jersey, he was one of the last of the Grand Sheiks to walk with Prophet Noble Drew Ali, and he always maintained, and that was the only temple I knew around the country because I've been traveling the country. The only temple that I knew that maintained the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, and he was the last one to walk with Noble Drew Ali, and he gave me a lot of literature, and I visited him one time, last time I seen him. He gave me his own Quran, Circle 7, Moorish Temple of Science. He gave me constitutional bylaws off the wall, and he called me in his office, and I was up there with Jurisdictional Bey and Brother Walter, and he called me, and we were actually going back. They used to have a Moorish ball every year, and he called me in his office, and he gave me those papers, and he gave me some other things. He said, I know you're going to do something with it. First time I seen him, last time I seen him. That was Grand Sheik Hamad Il. Also, Grand Sheik Elijah Neal Bey, Temple number 10 in Camden, gave me a lot of papers of Noble Drew Ali. He also walked with the Prophet. And a lot of the stuff that I published came from him. But publicly, a lot of these things would not be talked about. And I recognized, I sensed it immediately, that there were very many enemies within the movement who were very established. And that's, again, one of the motivations of me founding the Roundtable, because I knew that I would not be able to talk honestly under that platform. However, I maintained connection with the temples as I traveled the country and try to help where I could, but I was not going to play the club games that I saw many of them playing. And I saw a lot of the schism operations going on because I had done research into the paperwork of the FBI. So a lot of things that was obvious to me was not logically obvious to a lot of people who came into the movement emotionally and with good intentions. So I was, again, even when I officially nationalized, I told Grand Sheik Tarik Bey, I said, I'm telling you, when I come in, I'm coming and fighting. And of course, I don't know how they took it from that position, but I took it personally because I recognize that a lot of people who claim to be followers and supporters of Noble Drew Ali was really his enemy. And it becomes obvious when it comes to constitutional and treaty enforcement, which Drew Ali promoted, and of course, they were absolutely against. And so many of those same people logically are against me because I've always took that position of enforcing Constitution and treaty, knowing that the Constitution and treaty comprise the supreme law of the land, which is why I even produced this literature.
Bring it down some.
Yeah.
Bring it down. Yeah. There.
And also the green book, which you all see, the other book, the lesson books, give me that one.
This one?
Yeah, CM Bay, AA 222141. Yeah. And this one. And also I separated
Yeah.
I separated my original text because I was already running into a lot of the operatives within the movement who were attacking me, but I also knew that a lot of the people or the members in the temples were not aware of a lot of the information because they were not being told. And I also recognized in doing research when I looked at the classifications of citizenship, etc., and the Moorish nationality card. And then, of course, I did research into Charles Mosley Bey, etc., and I recognized with a lot of the registration of the information that was locked in the Library of Congress. And I wrote the Library of Congress, etc., and got the certificates of the nationality and identification cards, etc., that was registered there. And the only way you could basically get that information was through writing the Library of Congress, and then they would write you back after you would file papers with them. And then I saw a lot of the efforts with a lot of people always trying to make a division between the principles that Noble Drew Ali set up and, of course, C.M. Bey, etc. Then I went to the university in Cleveland, Ohio, Circle of Mothers and Sons, and the Clock of Destiny, etc. And I got certificates for those. And I recognized how many people who had that information was also holding that information back from the people playing club. I became emir by vote of the territorial states, with a meeting in actually in Land of Nod, i.e. at New York Territory, with order of the Great Seal, which there were many candidates running for that position. I didn't really necessarily want the position, but I went up there and I was elected emir of the Order of the Great Seal, 1993, and I've maintained the integrity of that office since then. And via the roundtable, I've been sharing that information with people who I knew that information was locked from, because number one, they didn't have the certificates. Then you had people who came into the Order of the Great Seal that started selling Great Seal documents, etc. And so what I did, I started issuing some of the paper freely to the people over the years, which made me unpopular with a lot of Great Seal members, etc. Because the issue was to liberate the people. That's always the position I've taken. And so that's when I produced this. But also, I wanted to bring this also to your attention in relationship to Article 3, the jurisdictional powers of the United States. And as a matter of fact, I want you to see this, and I copied that directly from the law books at Washington, D.C. And this logically is in support of the Moorish identification card of identification, etc., in the enforcement of Constitution and treaty. And this was my motivation to write this book, and I actually split the text on this book because I already knew, because of the opposition that I was running into, that many of these people were not sincere. And for many of you who have noticed some of the literature that I've written over the years, notice that I deliberately published a lot of the literature out of sequence. And that's because I saw them in my FBI papers. And then my Intuit mind saw a lot of people that I would run into over the years, and I recognized that many of them had ulterior motives, even many of the people that I've worked with. But knowing what I was dealing with, because this is actually war for the hearts and the minds of men, I've always used kind of like fifth-dimensional chess in dealing with them. And so as you can see, over the years, I've traveled the country, and I've talked to people outside the country too. And people from outside the country have come to visit me, from Palestine, from, Ecuador. The ambassador in Ecuador sent 3 people to see me in New York. 2 brothers and a woman came from Palestine to visit me in New York. In referencing to some of the work that I've done. And so that also inspired me to do this, because I recognize that this infiltration problem that we have is more deeply ingrained and bigger than I thought it was. So what I did research on the registration certificates that CMB registered in the Library of Congress, and did cross-reference into the numerical, the number system that was used on one of the certificates of identification. And one of the certificates of identification was AA222141. And while no reference was made to that by CMB himself, I did research on it, and I traced that down actually to treaty enforcement. And this is what I found. And I presented it in this book. And of course, later I did the treaty book for that purpose, because I recognized whenever you brought that up, people who had titles in the temples, a couple of them would say, we don't teach that civic stuff here. And one said, yes, that's true, but the people ain't ready for that. The usual thing they usually say. And then some was just totally zip-lipped. But I could tell by the expressions that they were a little upset that I found this knowledge. Now the 222141, that's AA, and I discovered that AA is the highest level of citizenship, i.e. dealing with nationals. Although its classification of citizenship, it is actually superior, and therefore it is unalienable, i.e. AA. And this is what I found. Title 22, Foreign Relations and Intercourse, page 954. Chapter 2, Consular Courts, Section 141, Judicial Authority Generally. Section 141, to carry into effect the full provisions of the treaties of the United States in China, Siam, Turkey, Morocco, Muscat, Abyssinia, Persia, and the territories formerly a part of the former Ottoman Empire, including Egypt. At that point, it took me to reference immediately to chapter 47 of the Circle 7 Quran. Interesting, wasn't it? Now, duly appointed to reside therein shall, in addition to other powers and duties imposed upon them, respectively, by the provisions of such treaties, respectively, be invested with the judicial authority described in this chapter, which shall appertain to the office of minister and consul, that's C-O-N-S-U-L, and be a part of the duties belonging thereto, wherein and so far as the same is allowed by treaty and in accordance with the usages of the countries in their intercourse with the Franks or other foreign Christian nations. And then it gives you all the law cases for reference, and there you are, you all. Can you see that? Take a screenshot.
Lift it up. I want to lift it up a little bit.
So logically, those who were against the constitutional enforcement have been mad at Taji Guy ever since 2001 when I published it in the paper. And particularly when I produced literature. Because keep in mind, whenever you have a title in any organization constitutes what you call an adept, and also is required by principle of scholarship for anyone who carries a title to produce literature, and that literature must be published and available for critique by colleagues and scholars and journalists at large. And so if you find people that have titles and have not produced literature on the subject matters in concern with their scholarly platform, their position is not honorable, But they know that most people who don't know fundamentals of scholarship and erudition are not aware of that. And so you see a lot of people collecting titles and positions and are actually in violation of institutional scholarship. But they got a lot of titles though. So many of them people are upset with Taji Guy. But my position with them, I'm not here to please or to converse with them or even to contest with them. My issue coming into this movement is the liberation of our people. And that is the truth. And my position is always seeking out the truth, not playing club. And if I find the truth, I'm going to tell it, and I'm not taking no death oath or no secret oath or no club oath. And I'm not interested in titles anyway. The deal of it is I'm interested in getting the work done. That's what I've been doing. And the other reason I found out how people were trying to undermine the Prophet was another motivation of me founding the Roundtable, because they can't control that platform. They mad about that too. And I use that platform to publish, and I use that platform to communicate with other people. And I try to keep it as uncolored as possible. Now, I want to further demonstrate to you or share with you Title 22, Laws of the United States, and also the certification of the identification, Morse identification. And this is Chapter 22, Title 22, Chapter 2, Section 142. The officers mentioned in Section 141 of this title are fully empowered to arraign and to try, in the manner provided for in this chapter, all citizens of the United States charged with offenses against the law committed in such countries, respectively, and to sentence such offenders in the manner in this chapter authorized, and each of them is authorized to issue such processes as are suitable and necessary to carry this authority into execution. RS subsection 4084. Title 22, Chapter 2, Section 143. General jurisdiction in civil cases. Such officers are invested with all judicial authority necessary to execute the provisions of such treaties, respectively, in regard to civil rights, whether of property or of person. And they shall entertain jurisdiction in matters of contract at the port where or nearest to which it was to be executed, and in all other matters at the port where or nearest to which the damage complained of was sustained, provided such port be one of the ports in which the United States are represented by consuls. Such jurisdiction shall embrace all controversies between citizens of the United States or others provided for by such treaties, respectively, RS subsection 4085. And there you go. That's the supreme law of the land, y'all. Now, of course, you will find many of the COINTELPRO operatives operating for the foreign jurisdiction of the Roman Curia members of the three-letter agencies who have been set forth to try to tell the people that what I have presented to you, and particularly in relation to the consular venue, that it was not true. Well, you can do the research for yourself, and there it is. It's documented. You can cross-reference it. Now, prove it wrong, because that's the law of the land. Now, those who have been traitors to the program of uplifting fallen humanity will condemn this at every corner. However, they're not condemning me. That's the law of the land. Let them play with that and let them prove that wrong. But for those of you who may be caught into the schism concerns, there's reference for you. You can do that research yourself. That's United States Code of Law, Chapter or Title 22, Foreign Relations and Intercourse, etc. Chapter 2, Consular Courts, Section 141, Judicial Authority Generally. And for those of you who are confused, you can go to the enforcement of the Constitution for the United States. That would be Article 3, Section 1 and 2. And it's very clear that the legitimate courts for the United States is for diplomats, ambassadors, and consuls, etc. for controversies in relationship to the different states. So when you're talking to different states, you're talking about political venues, i.e. both of the national and international venues, etc. So you see and will discover that Article 3, Section 2 deals with the consular venues of any controversy between any citizen, i.e. U.S. citizen, and i.e. any nationals or citizens in controversy relative to persons and to property in all cases, etc. Where the United States, i.e. or any of the republic states in controversy shall be heard. Therefore, the issue of the jurisdiction should always be challenged. Why? Because those principles have been violated by the U.S. citizens and by the people of the Moorish nation, i.e. Therefore, Drali says, for those of you who think that the program that I have for the redemption of my people and the citizens are wrong, i.e. or improper, etc., go to those who know law. I just gave you the law. And for those who are operating as FBI informants and those who have been infiltrating in the movements, all of the movements, claiming to be black advocates, etc., whatever game you've been playing, anybody does this research, you'll see the supreme law of the land is the treaties and the Constitution together. Thank you very much. And the venue for the controversies to be heard between Moorish Americans and any U.S. citizen is a consular venue. Blam, take that. And I don't care who's mad.
Such a final word. Is that it? I just want to get to the bottom questions. Someone had asked the question whether or not you felt that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is it pretty much like a attempt to move up this issue into the electric cars and different things. I don't know if that.
Well, what was the question?
I don't know. Did you think that was what was your take on what's going on?
What between?
Yeah, yeah.
No, keep this in mind. For those of you who are looking at world affairs, because it all affects you now. Because keep in mind, because as we've been telling people the last 10 years, that the nations are going to stop trading with the U.S. corporation. And of course, it's going to affect everyone. This is why every once in a while we would tell you, just like the prophet told you, store some food and water and stuff, because they're going to try to starve you out, which is what they're doing now. The issue with Ukraine has not been registered as a legitimate nation state since 1991. It is simply a territory that was annexed by the Roman Curia members operating from Fleet Street, England, etc., and from Davos, Switzerland, via the United States Corporation Company and the Queen of England, etc., with their unum sanctum operations, and it was actually a part of the former Soviet Union and was never separate, etc., other than by artificial or colorable political intrusion by what is called loosely the quote-unquote Western Alliance of hybrid Europeans, etc. So when Putin had been warning them for quite some time, because they had made agreements through the United Nations not to bring or to intrude in Russian territory, with nuclear weapons, etc., all of which they breached. Now, and also to close off the warm water port from Russia, which is in Crimea area. And this is what that politics has always been about. Not only that, the politicians here operating at North America under the colored jurisdiction de facto United States Corporation Company, which went bankrupt again in 2018, they have been what you call money laundering all of the funds from the different campaigns and from the different corporations for the senators and the congressmen operating here and other corporate members through Ukraine. Also, Ukraine has been used as one of the major passport areas for drug running, etc., money laundering, and what is known as the big A coming from little people that they have been using. Now, that's only the tip of the iceberg. So you all do some research, because that's being exposed on the international level, even though that information is being blocked at North America through the mainstream news or the mainstream press. But that information is well known around the world. So Russia is protecting its own border by right. And that's not taking anybody's sides. That's just the real history and the real politics.
So, I guess we are at the end, and we thank
Oh, guess what, you all? Everybody, all of you who have been sharing with us for all these years at the House of Reawakening Minds, you know Dr. Naila's solar return was yesterday, right? And I would suggest, because, you know, when I looked over the years with me sharing time with her at the House of Reawakening Minds, how many sacrifices that she has made personally and economically to maintain this platform for a lot of people, you know, not just myself, other people who have come and shared with you a lot of good information that has always been directed to helping the people or bringing remedy, unselfishly and with a good heart. And even though, you know, we don't always say it, I want her to know that I have much honorable respect for her, because a lot of people that was in the position that she was in before, who used to bring in a lot of fiat in being a pastor. When she had her epiphany, many of you might have at different times heard her give you her Kundalini, because it's part of Kundalini ascension, and her epiphany, you know, and she decided to tell the truth for what it is and close down that platform, and have been standing on research of truth ever since. And I applaud her for that, because many people who have been in that position of pastorhood where they bring finance and throw it at your feet, because I've seen some of the films, I already know, and she walked away from all that on cause of standing for truth and principle. And much credit is given to her for that. So why don't some of you, many of you who've been sharing with us, let's get together and celebrate her born day, because in history she's going to be remembered for a lot that she has done for the community. And I don't want to overemphasize it, but credit is due where credit is due. And I say, let's celebrate Dr. Naila's born day. Yes.
Thank you.
And you know, I was also dealing with research on the international venue. And I talked to Dr. Naila earlier today. I said, get more silver, because keep in mind, it's going to blow out in a couple months. They're holding stuff back because they don't want you to know. So for those of you who've been getting silver through Dr. Naila, I think you'll know. Put it this way: if you don't listen, call us in a month and a half and tell us what happened to the silver market. That's all I got to say. And then you already know that she's always been researching and doing things or promoting things that she knew would help the people. And that includes her doing research and starting to share with people the powers of natural healing, AO1 scan, AO scan, pardon me, and also chokeberry. So keep up with Dr. G, because Dr. G keeps up with us. And you don't have too many people that come into knowledge and education that really has unselfish love for people. And I've discovered that with Dr. G. She has done many things and put out much help as she can and done as much research as she can to help the people. And I got great respect for that. Also, others, get this book. And the next one's coming out soon, I trust. And every once in a while, we'll pick on her and say, Dr. G, give us one of your poems from your books, because she's really inspiring. But anyway, thank you all for sharing tonight with us at the House of Reawakening Minds. And trust we gave you all some foundational research points for you to do research that will help you along the way. And also recognize this. The courage that has been shown by many active Moors in these last 20 years, and say the last 10 for the most part, standing for the principles of national and international law for the redemption of the people's lost estates, etc., has now spread around the world. These principles that Noble Darley argued with the warning by the prophet to the nations back in the 20s is now the headline all around the world in all the nation states. And that's a fact. And with that I say, have a grand evening.
Okay, I just want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for all your wishes. Listen, next Tuesday, folk have been asking about having Brother Sabir on. I had an impromptu phone call where I think I was on his live today, but next Tuesday, which is the, what is that, 21st? No, it's the 22nd, whatever date Tuesday is. For next Tuesday's office hours with Dr. G, Brother Sabir Bey is going to be my guest, and I would recommend you tune in to that episode. I know some of you maybe thought or hoped that Grand Sheik would address some things, and he's not going there with that stuff, but that doesn't stop folks like myself and Brother Sabir Bey. So if you would tune in on Tuesday at 8 p.m. right back on this channel for Office Hours with Dr. G, we will we take it to the mat.
And many of you know Sabir. He's done many radio stations. As a matter of fact, I used to do a radio station with him at Philadelphia, WURD. And he was very impactful there. And of course, many of you who have been keeping up with him, one of the things that I've always liked about Sabir is that he never let people pigeonhole him. And recognizing that when you start dealing with truth or trying to bring truth to people, and you get involved with many organizations, they try to lock you down or try to tag you or try to box you up. And one thing I like about Sabir, he has that rebellious spirit that's necessary to liberate you from being cornered or put in a box. And he goes around the world, he travels the world, and he does research, and he's a scholar, and he researches, and he upsets a lot of people. Why? Because he tells it like it is. And I respect that. You know, so anyway.
Here's a question that keeps, because they put it in here like 15 times. They're asking you, and they're saying, isn't Russia an Asiatic nation?
Of course. Originally, yes.
Originally, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Of course it is.
So, of course it is. A lot of things are being
You know, and a lot of people need to do the research, because if it wasn't for Russia, the United States Republic that many of these Europeans have benefited from here at North America wouldn't have existed. Now that's a fact. Do some research, y'all. So when you see a lot of these hybrid Europeans complaining about Russia, they're ungrateful because they aren't telling you the truth about the history.
Okay, one last thing I'm going to put up here. The AO scan special that I have, if you really want to get one of these informative scans, even if we can't do your scan in March, if you pay for it in March, we can schedule it in April if need be. But yes, so if you want to take advantage of the AO scan special, please get to me before the 31st or by rather the 31st. And even if we do your scan in April, you're going to be really glad you did, because the information that you're going to get, you're not going to get it in any other manner unless you pay thousands.
Oh, you got that right.
Thousands of dollars for what you're
trying to block the people. However,
right. So
again, I have a lot of appreciation for you, Dr. G, for you making the effort and actually sacrificing and actually investing thousands of notes in your research to help the people. A lot of people don't know how much finances that you've actually invested trying to help the people. But I do, and I give you props for it, because it's a great sacrifice and you will benefit.
Thank you.
Call Dr. G. And also, official office hours with Dr. G. Check her out, because she's always trying to bring something to the front for the people. And keep in mind, whenever people start talking trash, you must be doing something right.
All right. Peace out. We're out of here.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is truth. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening